Chapter 1. First Day of School. He was the first boy I met when I arrived. He had red hair and skin that was lighter than mine. He smiled a lot. I knew I would like him when he told me his name. Jesus. You know, like Jesus, just different. He smiled and ran to the edge of the school building, peeked around the corner, and then looked back at me. I ran to join him. How long you been here? A year, maybe longer. What are you doing? Looking for the shadow. I looked where he was staring and could only see the grass blowing in the autumn wind. You see it? Yeah, I lied. I moved my head to the left and then the right to get a better view. It keeps moving. I track it. Have you ever caught it? Not yet. Sometimes it comes close. I can almost feel it. Then it disappears. He stopped looking and walked back to where we just were. I followed. His hair wasn't cut like mine. It was long past his shoulders. I liked the way the sun danced in it. I saw a bush and ran to it. Come here, look, blueberries. I started picking but stopped when he didn't join me. What's up? He didn't answer. I returned to him and we played a game that he liked. It involved sticks and a little ball. Do you like? He asked. It's okay. My uncle and father played something like it, but they threw the ball with the stick. You've seen it? I felt important and shrugged. Of course, everyone plays. He kicked the dirt and didn't say anything. Does the school have the proper ones? I asked. He shook his head. They don't give us those things. I made this. I looked at it again with renewed respect. I think I like yours better. He looked up and smiled. His whole face beamed. Thanks. Before I could pick up the stick to play, the school bell rang and we dropped everything and ran. A big woman covered in gray stood on the steps as we all ran towards the school. One look from her got my fellow classmates to stop running and form two lines. The girls formed a line and the boys formed another line. As this was my first day there, I got in behind Jesus. Everyone became silent and walked up the stairs. I could smell the nun as I passed her. She had a different smell than my mother, and nothing like us students. Her face wasn't smiling. I followed Jesus to the third classroom on the left. He sat in the back, nearest to the window. I sat in the desk next to him. Settle down, class. That's it. When everyone had found a seat, she continued. Today we have a new student. All eyes turned and found me. Some smiled, most just stared. I didn't know why they were looking at me. I didn't understand her words. Stand up. Yes, you. Good. She pointed at me and I realized I didn't have an option. I stood up. Tell us your name. I stared at her. Your name? She repeated. Then she pointed at herself. Sister Agatha. Then she pointed at me. McGeezy, I said. The other students laughed. Quiet down. I won't tolerate outbursts in my classroom. She glared at the offending students and I began to feel better. I liked that she stood up for me. Come here, she said to me and waved to me to come forward and pointed with her finger to the spot next to her. I shuffled towards the front of the class. I could feel every muscle and bone in my body. I could feel their eyes on me. I tried to think what I should say, but my mind went blank. All I could see was her getting bigger as I got closer to her. As you are new here, I think you should introduce yourself to the class. I will start. My name is Sister Agatha. I will be your teacher this year. She smiled and then indicated it was my turn. My name is McEasy, I said, hoping I was using her words the right way. There was a little laughter, but not like before. I felt myself shaking and couldn't speak. I held up 8 fingers. I don't know why they laughed at that. Very good, Sister Agatha said, but I think we're going to have trouble saying your name. How about, from now on, we call you David? Would you like that? I was shaking a lot and just wanted to return to my desk. I nodded because it seemed that's what I was supposed to do. I had no idea what she was saying. Good boy. Okay, David, you can sit down. Everyone, welcome David to our school. As I walked back, she began to clap, and everyone else joined in. I was feeling hot, and my palms were sweating by the time I got back to my desk. Now, today we are going to review what we learned yesterday. Open your desks and pull out your notebook. I didn't have anything in my desk. I looked at Gizis, and he didn't either. The woman didn't take any notice and kept on talking. I raised my hand. Yes? I held out my 2 empty hands. She paused and then went to a cupboard on the wall and took out a blue notebook. She seemed to notice something as she took out a second notebook. She then took out 2 pencils and placed them on her desk at the front of the room. She nodded towards the pile and then at me. I figured I needed to pick them up. When I returned to my desk, I gave 1 notebook and 1 pencil to Gizis and kept 1 of each for myself. I reached into my pocket and gave him a handful of blueberries I had picked earlier. He smiled at me, and I knew I had made a new friend. Are we supposed to eat this? I asked when lunch was served. The rest of the morning had been uneventful. Sister Agatha talked at us, and I tried to understand what she was saying. I sat in the back so she didn't see me. I wasn't called. I was happy when the lunch bell sounded. Just wait, he said. I'm starving, I said. I put my spoon in and tried it. Ew, this is awful. Shh, just eat it. Gizis waited with his hands in his lap. I didn't understand why he didn't try it. It was disgusting, but it was still lunch. David? The voice was loud. There were 3 teachers in the room now, all dressed in the same funny gray with something over their heads. The voice sounded like Sister Agatha. I guessed she was angry at one of the boys. I took another bite. David! The voice was right next to me. I turned around and saw my teacher standing there, face becoming reddish. I looked around to see who she was yelling at. Sister Agatha? I said with a small voice. In response, she grabbed my ear and made me stand up. She then led me to the front of the room where the other teachers were standing. I could see the eyes of the entire school on me. I didn't know what I had done wrong. I thought you were a good boy, she said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. I began to shrink. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to answer. I guess I was wrong. Are you a bad boy? I couldn't say anything. I had begun to shake. All those eyes burned on me, and I had never had a strange elder yell at me before. If I had done something wrong, my mother or father would deal with me in private. She was still holding my ear, and it hurt like nothing I had felt before. You know what we do to bad boys? We discipline them. She nodded to one of the other teachers, who took a long wooden ruler off the blackboard on the wall. I noticed this room wasn't just for eating. It was for teaching as well. It was like a very big classroom. Put your hands on the desk over there. She pointed to the large wooden teacher's desk as she directed me there by my ear. She let go and I put my hand to my ear. I said, hands on the table. The voice cut through the room and it became more silent than if there had been no people in it. I put my hands flat on the table, fingers together. I didn't see the other teacher until I felt the pain. She slammed the yardstick on my fingers. I could see it raised to strike again, but I had taken my hands away. My fingers were in my mouth, and I could feel the tears begin to swell. You are turning out to be a very different boy than what I had hoped. Hands on the desk. Now. She grabbed my other ear, and I didn't know where the pain was coming from anymore. My hands hurt, and now both my ears hurt. I did what she said and felt the wood hit my hands again. I began to cry. That's enough, Sister Christina, Sister Agatha said. The other teacher nodded and returned the yardstick to the blackboard. Sister Agatha turned to me and asked, Are you going to be a good boy? I didn't know what she was saying, but I nodded. Agreeing with her seemed the right thing to do. Then go back to your seat. I did. She waited until I was back in my seat, and then she began to pray. All the other students bowed their heads and repeated what she said. I didn't know the prayer, so I bowed my head and let the tears run slowly down my cheeks. I wasn't hungry anymore. I heard Jesus say something to me after the heads were up and eyes opened. I couldn't understand what he said either. My head was swimming in anger, confusion, and shame for what had just happened. What? I asked. It came out a little too loud, and the students from the next table turned their heads. Jesus waited until their heads returned to their food before repeating himself. Your name. What about it? You didn't respond to it. They never said my name. Your new name. I don't remember what she said. David. Oh, I said. Remember, it's hardest the first few days. Keep listening for it. Okay. And the food, what about it? Never eat it before grace. I deserved it. I know that now. I just didn't know the rules. I told myself I wouldn't break any more of the school rules. I was always a good boy before I arrived here. My parents told me that every day. We had to pray after our meal and then form 2 lines to go and work outside. Just do what I do, Jesus said. Okay. I followed him outside. Watch out for the fat one, the one with the red face. She uses the strap faster than anyone. I scanned the teachers and found the nun he was talking about. She wasn't shorter than any of the others, just fatter. I could see her laughing with one of the other nuns. Why do they wear those strange clothes? I asked. Those? I don't know. The sisters in Mother Superior wear funny clothes. Some of the brothers too, but the outside teachers are better. How can you tell? You'll see. Who's that guy? He's Father O'Flaherty. He's also dressed funny. I know, but never say anything, or it'll mean the strap. I tried to understand. When I arrived, before I met my friend Jesus, I had to give all my clothes and belongings to one of the brothers. They said I'd get them back when I left. They gave me new clothes. I didn't mind. I looked like everyone else now. How come they didn't shave your head? I asked. I was still getting used to having hair that showed my scalp. I noticed all the other kids had the same type of cut, except Jesus. I don't know, he said. The father specifically told them not to cut my hair. I wanted to touch his hair. I'd never seen a boy with long red hair before. No one else in the school had red hair, not even the girls. He didn't seem to mind and began to run towards the garden. Why are we running? They're just going to make us work. He turned and looked at me and smiled again. His hair covered his face as he did so. We want to get the best job. What is the best job? One where we can eat while we pick. He sped up, and we got to the edge of the garden at the same time as the older boys. They looked to be either 10 or 12. This is our area, Jesus. He was 4 inches taller than Jesus, and 3 more of his friends arrived by the time I got there. You can deal with the potatoes. Why don't you dig for potatoes? Jesus said. I stood behind him, the way the other boys' 3 friends stood behind him. The taller boy stepped forward and pushed Jesus. Go play with yourself. We're doing the corn and the carrots. Jesus launched himself head first at the older boy. All I saw was the flurry of red hair and his feet pushing. The older boy was surprised and fell over. Even some of his friends stumbled. You can stick your potatoes, he screamed. He then jumped on the boy and began punching his head. I still don't know whether it was from shock or fear that the older boy didn't fight back. I tried to look tough in order to keep the other 3 boys away, but 2 men rushed between us. They picked up Jesus and told me to join him. The other man grabbed the older boy. I found out later that these 2 men were called brothers Zorsha and Nicholas. What is this about? The darker brother Zorsha said when he had pulled us apart. Ogima won't let us pick the corn or the carrots, and we got here first today. Jesus' face was smeared with mud and his nose was bleeding. Other than that, he looked fired up. I stood taller with pride. Who? Brother Zorja had his hand on the strap. Matthew, Gizis said, suddenly aware of who he was talking to. Brother Zorja swung and hit him on his bare leg with the strap. He hit again. No tears. He then hit the other leg. I saw Gizis grimace, but held back the tears. The first two were for the fighting. The third was for refusing to call your classmate by his name. I got one strap for participating and felt pretty good. I deserved something, but at least it wasn't 3. I don't think I could have handled it as well as Gizis. Joseph. What? I heard the name, but didn't know what he was talking about. You're supposed to call me Joseph and not Jesus. If you call me Gizis, you'll get the strap. He walked back to where the potatoes were, and we took the little shovel and began to dig. Careful not to cut the potatoes. You need to loosen the dirt next to the dead plants, then you get on your knees and feel for the potatoes. Okay, I said. I didn't comment on the names, but I saw what happened when the rules were broken. Just put the potatoes next to where you have dug. We'll come back later and pick them up. How did you learn so much about this? Last year. You learned a lot. I've never seen a potato except on a plate. Gizis liked that. Nothing to it. His leg was showing a big red welt where the strap hit him in the same spot. Mine wasn't so bad. The bigger boys were stripping the corn and digging up carrots. I could see them sneaking some of the food in their pockets. They're taking food for later. Don't snitch, he said. Why not? They'd do it to us. Besides, I don't want to break the rules. The teachers have their rules and we have ours. Don't snitch. I wanted to say something. It didn't seem fair. I kept my head down and put the shovel into the ground and pulled on the handle. The ground became loose and I did it all over again. By the time the bell rang, we had done the entire row. We were filthy from the dirt, but happy. I enjoyed it. On the way back to the main building, Brother Nicholas pulled me aside. You can't go back like that. You're too dirty. He had me by the shoulder. I can clean up inside, I said. Let me. We should be able to knock that dirt off you. He began dusting and patting me to drive off all the dirt. It worked. My t-shirt looked almost clean and my jeans were normal, except for some grass stains on my knees that wouldn't come out from that technique. Thanks. Hurry up. You don't want to be late. He smiled and waved me back into the line. Gizis had saved me a seat next to him for supper. We kneeled first as Father O'Flaherty said the prayers. He left us to the nuns, and we all sat down. There were a lot of us there, all the girls and boys and all the grades. I was with the younger students, as I was in grade 3. The older boys sat together by grade. The girls were on one half of the room, and we were on the other. I'm starving more than at lunch. Don't hold your breath. I don't care what it is. I'll love it. I was serious. I never came across a meal I couldn't eat. Gizis looked at me with his elbows on the table. We watched as the older kids got their food and returned to their seats. It was done by the table. We were last. I hoped there would be food for us by the time we got there. It's not so bad, I said as I sat down. Looks like yesterday's and tomorrow's and all last year's, Gizis said. I took a bite. Not bad. Meat and potatoes. I wonder if they used the potatoes we just dug up. Really? I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say to that. I ate in silence for the rest of the meal. There wasn't any dessert. Sister Agatha led the prayers while we knelt after eating. We were then dismissed. We lined up 2 by 2 as we did all day and walked to our dorms. It wasn't far. We slept 1 floor up from the kitchen and dining room. The older boys and girls slept in separate dorms upstairs. The school was separate from where we ate and slept. I was happy about that for some reason. Can I sleep next to you? I asked Gizis. Sure. Grab a bed and make sure everyone knows it's yours. You should be okay. I looked at the single bed on the steel frame. Don't we get any covers? In winter, yes. I'm hoping they'll give us some blankets now as well. Don't you get cold? You get used to it. Being cold? He smiled. I was starting to become afraid. It was the first time that I missed my home and my parents. I've been cold before, but I always had my parents to warm me up. And we had blankets and a fire on very cold days. I could feel the concrete on my feet and the cold rising up into me.
Everyone, time for prayers. On your knees. Good. Take your rosary out and recite the Apostles' Creed and the Lord's Prayer with me.
Brother Nicholas had come into our room and cast his eye over all the beds. His eyes fell on me briefly. I nodded. He smiled in return. I didn't know what a rosary was or what they wanted to pray about. I decided to keep my mouth shut, kneel, and hope no one noticed. The concrete was colder on my knees than my bare feet. It hurt, but I knew I had to stay down. I looked around and everyone was on their knees. They were all saying the prayer out loud. I felt ashamed that I was the only one stupid enough not to know it. I was determined to stay on my knees, but it hurt. I looked at Brother Nicholas and noticed him looking at me. He must have known that I didn't know the words.
Back in bed. Lights out.
He left without doing anything to me. I felt the relief as I sunk into my bed. I thought about the look on my parents' faces when I left for school. I had never seen my dad cry before, and he had just returned a hero from the war. I even saw the medal, but his eyes were brimming earlier today. My mother looked at me like her face was set in stone. I didn't understand what they were concerned about. School seemed fine to me.